It is the acronym that gets heard around sports conversation like no other. GOAT. GOAT. Used to be when I was growing up, the GOAT was the guy or the team that blew the game. The dude was the GOAT. You're the GOAT. You blew the game. It's completely changed. Somebody finally figured out, we've got an acronym here. Greatest of all time. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everyone being here for our conversation that is just going to get started tonight. So I am not going to be unveiling my all-time college football programs rankings list. That is not for tonight. What we are going to see tonight is just here in the last couple of weeks, it's been released online. The metrics surrounding the all-time program rankings according to the Associated Press and according to the coaches poll. The Associated Press began in 1936. It was, I believe, initially a top 20 poll. There was a time period in the 60s, I believe, for about 6 to 7 football seasons in which the Associated Press poll was only 10. The top 10, that's it. If you didn't make the top 10, you can get your name in the paper. And then it went back to a top 20 and then to a top 25 around, I believe, 1989. The coaches poll began in 1950, and that was initially on the platform of the United Press International. So for you old folks, you remember UPI. There was the AP and UPI. They were rivals. They were counterparts. And the UPI faded away and gave way to the coaches poll, which was first manned by USA Today and then later by ESPN. So you've got the Associated Press writers poll, which started in 1936, and then the coaches poll, which, of course, is a vote from various coaches across the country. Not every one, not all 130 coaches, but roughly about 65 coaches. That started in 1950, UPI, then USA Today, ESPN coaches poll. So what somebody has put together is basically a metric that has measured a team's prowess or status in the polls. So they basically put a point system, which actually I've not looked up the point system. What I'm guessing the point system is that if you finish number one in the country in any given season, that you would get 25 points for being number one. You're number one out of 25. So you get 25 points for being number one. And you get 24 for being number two at the conclusion of the season. And then on down the line, and the 25th rated team in the country gets 1 point. Add up all the points, and the team with the most points is ranked the highest all time. So the AP released, or somebody did the calculations. I don't know that the AP and the coaches ranking system by ESPN did the metrics, but it doesn't take a mathematician to put together a system which will calculate all of this 1 through 25 and 1 through 10 and 1 through 20 way back when, that designated a point total to the rankings. And we'll talk about the flaw in that system in ranking the teams all time. And then we'll talk about, I want to hear from you because I certainly have thoughts about what else should be under consideration in ranking programs all time. I have a number of things under consideration. Then I think that there are a lot of periphery items that can be calculated and evaluated and kept track of that I can certainly see both sides of it. For example, NFL draft selections. Should NFL draft selections be part of the metric to determine all-time program rankings? Because it is certainly a measurement of the talent that played at that school. There's no question about that. All you have to do is look at the teams with the most NFL draft picks and the most first-round NFL draft picks, and they are the very top of the line greats of college football. Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, etc. USC. But that measurement has nothing to do with what the performance and the results on the field. The results on the field are the results on the field. And if you can't accomplish the results on the field with no future NFL players and you win the games, then why measure future NFL players? So I can understand both sides of that. Heisman Trophy winners. In my extremely humble opinion, the Heisman Trophy is the most prestigious award in American sports, which may surprise some of you to hear me say that, because I often discount the Heisman Trophy Award. When people ask me, predict who's going to win the Heisman Trophy Award, and my initial response is always, you're asking me to predict what somebody else is going to vote on. That's not like predicting a game. That's predicting what somebody else is going to vote. Okay, so I do believe it to be the most prestigious award in American sport. However, it's completely subjective. Just because a bunch of sports writers determined that the running back at Oklahoma should be the Heisman Trophy winner, why should Oklahoma be credited in an all-time program ranking with getting more recognition because they've got the best running back in the nation, as determined by a bunch of sports writers? It's just not tangible. It's a point of prestige, but it's not tangible. Really, the only thing that's tangible, unless somebody can refute me on this and provide a different perspective, to me, there are only two measurements in college football that are completely objective. Number one, wins and losses. It's objective. You either won the game or lost the game. There's no opinion given. And number two are conference championships. You either win the conference championship or you don't win the conference championship. Everything else, there's a measurement of subjectivity to it. Because if you're All-American, All-Conference, if you're a Heisman Trophy winner or win another major award, that had to be voted on. Just because you're the consensus All-American quarterback, that doesn't mean you are the best quarterback in the country. That means that was the perception. If you win the game, you win the game. If you lose the game, you lose the game. That is completely objective. Even championships, even national championships are subjective to the point that there had to be a determination by people. And this is the great fallacy in college football. There had to be a determination by people on who would get to play in the playoff, or in the former era, the BCS championship game, or even in the bowl games going way, way back to a certain extent. If there were not conference championships involved, the at-large bids given to teams to play for national championships or to be eligible to be voted on for a national championship was based on popularity, basically. If you were a popular team, then you would often jump higher ranked teams with better records at times, to play in major bowl games. All right, so we're doing all this to get your feedback on what should be considered for all-time program rankings, because based on popular demand and my own desire to do this, I'm going to take on the task of ranking college football programs. Not tonight, because you all know that I'm thorough and want to do it right. This is just the launch. This is the launch of getting your opinion, and also running down the release of a couple weeks ago of the all-time AP and coaches poll rankings. I'm going to run these down before I take any of the calls. 860-499-3332, 860-499-3332. Let me pull the number up here. The call-in number is on the bottom of the screen on the ticker, 860-499-3332. And notice on the banner here, if you want to talk college football with me and others, join us on Discord. We've got a Discord that we just launched on Tuesday here at the Voice of College Football. Go to Patreon, sign up. I'll get you the link where you can join us on Discord. We have 6 channels on Discord. If you don't know what Discord is, it's a big chat room. I didn't know what it was 2 or 3 months ago. It's a big chat room. And we have set up 5 channels. You can jump on any channel that you want and start up a conversation or respond to somebody else's comments. But the 5 channels are, of course, the 5 conferences and then also a national channel. And then we will add more channels as we go. When there's a big matchup like Ohio State, Notre Dame, we'll probably start a channel just for that game. And then once the game's over, we'll kill the channel. So we're going to have a lot of fun in Discord. I check it all the time, so you can talk college football with me and others. Again, go to Patreon, search MarkRogersTV. All right, before I take this call, here's the rundown of all-time program rankings according to the coaches poll and the AP. Okay, these are the AP rankings. Number 10 is Tennessee. And the designation there in the parentheses is where they rank according to the coaches. So Tennessee's at number 10. They are 13th in the coaches poll all time. So again, coaches poll started in 1950 and the AP poll in 1936. Penn State's at number 9. Number 9 in the AP poll, number 8 in the coaches poll. At number 8 is Texas, and they are number 9. They flip-flop with Penn State in the coaches poll. Our number 7 team, and certainly they have not helped themselves out in these rankings over the past 6 or 7 years, but Nebraska is still holding firm at number 7 all time. And they are tied in the 6th position in the coaches poll with USC. USC number 6 all time in both the coaches and the AP poll. At number 5, Michigan. Number 4 in the coaches poll, number 5, Michigan in the AP poll. Can you guess the top 4? You probably can. Number 4 is Notre Dame. Number 5 in the coaches poll. Number 4 in the AP poll. At number 3, and also this is number 3 in the AP poll, just a few points back of number 2 and number 1. Number 3 in the AP poll, tied for first in the coaches poll, all times Ohio State. At number 2, you've got Alabama. Alabama's number 2 in the AP poll and number 3 in the coaches poll. And at number 1, and tied with the Buckeyes at number 1 in the coaches poll, is Oklahoma. So there you have it. Now let's take some calls and get your thoughts. We'll start with, I believe I know who this is. Welcome into the Voice of College Football.
To the man that gives college football its voice, now and forever, the great Mark Rogers.
David, how you doing tonight?
How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Well, you put it out there, and I just have to chime in. I put my top 5 out there, but before I do, I'm going to try and put out as best a criteria as I can. I do think that the criteria should be, I'm with you. I do think that winning percentage, those things do have to matter. I'm not denying that. But I do think, especially, because we've had a way to determine a national championship for going on, 24 years now, right, Mark?
Yes.
Since 1998. Okay. So we have had some way for a fairly decent period of time to determine a national championship. I agree. A lot of the national championships all the way up to 97 were very, very, would you use the term subjective, Mark, or what would you use to describe a lot of those national championships?
Flawed.
Okay.
Flawed, subjective.
I can
yes, subjective.
Maybe both.
Yeah. And I'm making a list, by the way, David, because you may have heard me say that what I want to do is put together a system and then put all the numbers in and then create an all-time program ranking. So I am taking your suggestion as well as everybody else's in terms of what you think should be included in the system, what you would take into consideration.
Okay. So on to kind of a little bit more of my criteria, and then I'm going to kind of go over my top 5 here. I would say that, All-Americans should be taken into consideration. I don't know if that quite makes like the top 5 of my criteria. I do think Heisman should be taken into consideration. Now, would you put more emphasis on Heisman's or All-Americans, Mark? I don't know how you would weigh that.
All-Americans, because every position's included in the Heisman's a quarterback award and used to be a running back award.
Okay. Here's one that definitely helps my favorite team. What about draft picks, maybe first-round draft picks?
And then I think after we do all this, then you can obviously give different weights to different categories. You can say Heisman trophies are not as important as winning percentage, of course, because those are the actual games played on the field, but you still want to give it some weight. So we can weight this different in each category. So to me, I don't know if you heard me, I made the point off the top that I can understand somebody saying NFL draft selections shouldn't count. It's just a measurement of talent. It's just a measurement of what the next level thinks of your players, and the results on the field should be the only thing that counts. However, I would like to include it. I do think it ties into the prestige of a program, and it's a measurement of the talent produced by the program.
Can I add another point to that, Mark?
Sure.
I think the other factor that needs to be considered with that is that that's an area that drives recruiting nowadays.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you put the high school athletes under, one of their biggest criteria, a lot of them will tell you in their interviews that, they see all these guys going to the NFL. And that's been a big part of the criteria now for a number of years, I would say. Wouldn't you?
Yes, absolutely. There's no question about that. So I'm going to give you a very ridiculous example, but just to make a point of the previous point that I was trying to make about the results really should be all that matters. So let's say we had a college football program that produced no NFL players and won every game and every national championship. Would they not have the greatest college football program of all time?
Sure. I get where you're going.
So,
I mean,
so I can only go through so many metrics. So I'm not going to make this too complicated for myself once I dig into this. But when you bring up NFL players, there's obviously a distinction made between drafted players and free agents. Now, I'm not going to go through every free agent that's ever come out of every school or anything like that, but we have free agents who then become successful NFL players, and obviously we have draft selections that are busts. So you can go into that whole thing because you could have 10 players drafted from one school and they all turn out to be marginal players or busts, and then you could have 8 players drafted from another school and they could turn out to be star players. So again, no system is going to be perfect in measuring any of this.
Sure. I mean, I think that usually All-Americans, Heisman's, wins, winning percentage, national championships. I think conference championships are also a big factor too, Mark. That's got to be probably fairly high on your list, I would think, right, Mark?
Absolutely. So you bring up wins and you bring up winning percentage. I would think in a certain sense, if you measure winning percentage, there's no reason to measure wins.
Okay. So, well, let me ask you this, though. Could you also, because not all wins are created equal, emphasis on winning percentage against maybe the top 20, top 25,
yes,
top 10,
yep,
something like that, too? You know,
Yeah.
bowl record would probably be a big factor too. I don't know how much of an emphasis you put on that.
So you have yet to name what I just reviewed, and that's the rankings,
Okay.
the actual AP
See,
and coaches poll rankings.
Let me give you my top five because I
Okay.
just went ahead and put it out there and see what you think. My top five, and this is another factor that I want to throw out. The last factor I want to throw out there before I put out my top five. I do think national relevancy matters.
Okay.
You know, that's the one thing that I think could hurt. Like if we had this discussion in the early 2000s or late 90s, that's what would put maybe a Miami or a Nebraska or Florida State very high on the list.
Yeah.
Although I guess Florida State's been relevant recently with, when Jimbo was there with the Winston teams and that. But particularly Miami and Nebraska, obviously, right, Mark?
Well, not to cut into your list here, but
Yes.
what I'm attempting to do would be all-time rankings, not this is where they stand right now. So all that has to be taken into consideration, meaning
all right.
you've got your consistent programs through time, and then you've got your microwave dynasties like Miami. And, it all has to be taken into consideration, at least. And then you could also, David, think about the relevance or the weight given to recency. Should a national championship in 2005 count more than one from 1935?
Great point. See, that's why I think a lot of people. Remember, I had asked you that question at one time because people usually look at national championships. I believe starting in the quote unquote poll era, from 1936 to the present. That's usually what's recognized. All right, here's my top five, and this has probably been a fairly etched in stone top five for me, probably in the last 7 to 8 years.
Okay.
My number five is Oklahoma. My number four, some might be a little bit surprised by this, but I have Ohio State at 4. But I think it's a close call. I have USC at 3. I have Notre Dame at 2, and then I have Alabama at 1.
Okay.
Now, what do you think? Now, my reasoning for putting USC, and the USC Ohio State thing was close. Although I think with them having head-to-head, their bowl record, those factors weighed heavily on me.
Okay. So you answered my first question. So yeah, USC has a decided head-to-head over Ohio State and has a remarkable Rose Bowl record in particular.
I think it's 13-10-1, Mark. I don't know if that's decided.
Oh, okay. It's decided since the 70s. So Ohio State must have had a nice lead because, man, since let's go back, I'm gonna date myself, since my lifetime, which would have started with the Buckeyes win over OJ in the 1 versus 2 matchup in the Rose Bowl. So the Ohio State gets a win there, but USC beat them 3 out of 4. No.
Well, yeah.
Archie lost 3 out of 4
Correct.
Rose Bowls, but 1 was against UCLA. So USC won 2 out of 3 there. So that's a 2-2. And then, of course, they played in the 80 Rose Bowl for the national title that the Buckeyes could have won, 17-16. So there's 3-2. The 85 game makes it 4-2. Then they played back-to-back in 89 and 90, as you well know.
Right.
Home and home. So that takes us to, where am I, 7-2? Wait a minute.
Right. 08-09.
And then 08-09, USC wins back-to-back again, and then the Buckeyes win the Cotton Bowl. So whatever that is, it's like 8 or 9-3 in the last 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, I know Woody won his first national championship by beating them in 1954.
Yes.
In the Rose Bowl. So that you can throw that in there. And by the way, two 1-point losses to USC cost Ohio State national championship
Yeah, I know.
in the 70s. How tough is that?
Well,
including the game that made a very young Mark Rogers cry.
yes, pretty much. You pretty much nailed it. I remember standing at the bus stop the next morning, not like wanting to live, like I was in sixth grade, and yeah, my goodness, I was devastated, because Sports Illustrated had a big layout, and this is at a time, obviously, that you can relate to, David, when you were just starved for information. You're reading the sports section every day, and you're getting your hands on sporting news and Sports Illustrated and everything possible. And USC was a decided favorite in that game. And my Buckeye colored glasses, of course, made me think that Ohio State's going to win the game. But I was hearing how talented USC was. And then Ohio State plays this tremendous game. They've got a lead with 2.5 minutes left. And then USC just rams the ball down their throats for the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Charles White.
Yes. It's like 17 plays, 83 yards, I believe. Yeah, it was brutal.
Well, I mean, you look back on it, they had 3 NFL Hall of Famers on one football team. I mean, when you got Anthony Munoz, Ronnie Lott, and Marcus Allen on one football team, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And their entire roster was NFL guys. Now, it's conversely, Ohio State had a better team than them in 1984 and then lost by 3 points.
Yep.
With that whole team with Byers and Spielman and Chris Carter and Pepper Johnson and Tom Zach at quarterback. They were better than USC in 84 and shouldn't have lost that one, but, couldn't come back late.
When you consider the talent on that 84 Ohio State team, you just mentioned a bunch of them. Pretty much the offensive line was an NFL offensive line, and Spielman and Pepper Johnson at linebacker. And as you mentioned, Chris Carter and Byers, and the secondary was really good. William White.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the nice things of the Urban era was finally ending that losing streak with that Cotton Bowl victory. Even though that was a year where we wish we could have made the playoffs, it was nice to end that losing streak. Although Tressel should have ended it in 09 when he coached scared and blew the game in 09 to Matt Barkley and USC. Yeah. But, I digress. But, yeah, I mean, here's the one thing I'll say, and I'll just say this as a long-time Ohio State fan. The one thing I would say that where I think we should be higher, and I know you don't put as much weight on national titles, and you talked about them being subjective and all of that, but I will say this as an Ohio State fan, and just bottom line, is that for a program that's produced more first-round draft picks than any other college program, as we talked about it, is in the top 3 or 4 in All-Americans produced, NFL draft picks, is tied with USC and Notre Dame for the most Heisman Trophy winners ever. I would like to think we should have had more than 2 national titles in the last 50-some years. I mean, that's the wont of every Ohio State fan. And every Ohio State fan would be honest and would admit that, and I'll admit that today. And that's why one of the reasons I had to put it to 4.
Yeah. I am with you. I am with you, David. Well, thank you so much for your thoughts.
Well, I look forward to your list, Mark, and you keep up the good work, my friend.
Thank you. Appreciate it, David. Have a good night. So there will be no list out of me tonight. We're just getting this conversation started. So I'm hearing from you. I just ran down the AP and the coaches poll rankings all time when you put all the points together of how it ranks. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hi, Mark. Chris.
Hey, Chris.
How are you?
I'm good.
Oh, I just thought I'd add to the caller that just, and this obviously is based on whether or not my metrics are correct, which, you have to think you might even have a few qualms about whether it is or isn't, which is fine. I have, at the moment, the thing about my metric, I'll have to be honest with you, Mark, it's not set in stone. It's not like, etched in stone to where it's like I can say, no question about it. It's Notre Dame or, whoever. Anyway, at the moment, pending confirmation or whatever, I have Alabama first at 7.755. which is really actually better, I think, than I expected. I didn't, anything over 70% is actually pretty good. I mean, most teams can't even ever hope to even be. So they're at about 76% proficiency. And then I have, according to the metrics I've done so far, I have Ohio State second right now at 0.752. So they're within striking distance actually of Alabama as far as, and the only reason they're not maybe even ranked ahead of Alabama. One of the things I've done, I kind of want to clue you in onto some of this because I think you kind of wondered yourself. I think you're kind of scratching your head a little bit, aren't you, about this guy for real, or is he just, I would ask myself the same question because I don't. Anyway, the SEC actually plays to a higher level of, in general. It doesn't, but it's not like insurmountable to where it's like, oh, if you're in the SEC, you're gonna kind of like last year when Alabama and Georgia both qualified to that's the way I look at it. They both qualified to play for the national championship. Well, that's based partly on the fact that the SEC plays to a higher measure of performance. So, and then I have right now I have Georgia. These are all time figures, by the way. I have Georgia at 0.722, so they're up there pretty high. Oh, another team that's actually ranked very high in proficiency is Tennessee. Let's see if I can find them here. They're about 7. They're just a little bit behind Georgia, so like 0.718. And like I said, anything over 70% is really good. Like really good. One interesting thing, we talk about Miami. When I'm not trying to, I know I say things on your, which I apologize. I'm not pro Miami. I'm not. I'm just not. I'm just me. I'm just. People don't have to agree with what I do, but I have Miami at 0.635, which is pretty good, but it's not as high as some of the other. I have Oklahoma at 0.716. So Oklahoma's got a pretty good proficiency, and then I have Texas. Let me see if I can find Texas here. I know Texas I have a 0.703, so they're up above 70%. I have USC above 70% too. They're pretty good. So I can find them here anywhere. Well, Notre Dame I had somewhere between, because I didn't quite pin Notre Dame down, but it looks like they're about 71.71. And see if I have another one I can share with you right off the top of my. Michigan, I have about 72. Michigan's really pretty good. They're real up there pretty good. And then, like I said, USC's up there pretty good. I think they're at about, so I can find them here. I know I did their numbers. USC, 712.712. And then Nebraska's up there pretty good too. Nebraska's 0.703. So those are the ones I think that have the best overall so far. Like I said, I haven't done the whole. It's hard. It's not the hardest thing to do, but I have to go and I have to get all the numbers, and then you might not agree with the way I do it because it's kind of my own thing. I mean,
what are these numbers based on?
Performance. It's like it'd be like going to I don't know. What's an activity you enjoy doing? I don't know. Just throw something out there.
Okay.
Do you like to skate, or do you like to
evaluate?
You evaluate a performance.
Sure. I understand that. There's different ways you can evaluate a performance. So if Ohio State goes 10-0 and Notre Dame goes 10-0, what is your proficiency rating going to base any kind of difference on those two records? How is that going to take place?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that's actually a good question. And that's where it kind of is a little bit open to interpretation a little bit, because Notre Dame's independent, right? Or at least, I mean, they're not really independent, but that they're kind of sort of.
They are.
They're kind of between being independent. No, because they're with the ACC. But anyway,
no, they're
I give them a little bit of a. Well, not really, but that's okay.
They're independent.
They're part of the.
They're not part of the
Atlantic
ACC.
Coast. I mean,
no, they're not.
Yes, they are.
They cannot win an ACC championship. They could win.
Anyway, I don't want to
if Notre Dame wins every game this season, they will not be the ACC champions. So how are they part of the ACC?
All right. Well, 5 out of 9, but that's whatever.
Okay.
We don't really need to go in there. It's if you don't want to accept them as being, that's fine. It's not really critical to what I'm doing here. So even if it's right about it, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't. But what it does, though, in fairness, they boost. Notre Dame is so good. I mean, and I don't even really like saying this because I'm really not that big of a Notre Dame fan. They're so good that they really boost the ACC a lot. is kind of where I'm
They're
coming from.
not in
So if you say
the
they're not part of it,
ACC. So let's get away. Forget my Notre Dame comment in comparison with Ohio State. Let's just take two teams. They're both 10. They both went 10-2.
well,
They both went 10-2 against their schedules. How does your proficiency rating determine who's better out of those two teams if they didn't play each other? I'm just trying to figure out
right
what
now,
your proficiency rating, where it draws its numbers and how it works.
well, that's kind of it's like you're throwing too much of a curveball at me. I don't know what 10 against. So I mean, against the same teams, 10-0 against different teams. I mean, probably the same, but it's like not really the same because. But anyway, as far as answer your question about who I have ranked ahead of the other, I have Ohio State ranked ahead of Notre Dame. Does that help you? I mean, it's not because I like Ohio State better than Notre Dame.
No,
that's the question you're asking me. I mean, I have Ohio State ranked ahead right now. Some of these figures that I've done.
My question's not specifically about Ohio State and Notre Dame. It could be about Iowa and San Diego State. If you've got two teams and they have the same record, one of them, let's say, is North Carolina and the other one is Stanford. They don't play each other. They didn't play anyone comparable or in the same conference. They're both 10-2. How does your proficiency rating distinguish those two teams?
Okay, well, it's a fair question. I don't make distinctions, but to be fair, if it was like you said, Stanford you said, and North Carolina, I think I would probably have to, unless you're letting me include Notre Dame, which doesn't sound like you're going to let me, I'd have to probably give more credence to Stanford than to North Carolina, but it's not because I think that that's really the way it is. But I have as a conference, I think I posted these already on here. I think I have the Pac-12 or Pac-10 or whatever you want to call it. I think I have them cumulatively positioned marginally ahead of the Atlantic Coast Conference overall, which would give probably a little bit of a competitive advantage to Stanford because of playing in a
and this is all time.
But if you're asking me if how I do it all time, no, I don't. I would probably not give an advantage to either one. But are you asking me if Notre Dame or Stanford's ranked ahead of North Carolina? Because I think I have them both here.
Your proficiency rating, what you just mentioned about the Pac-12 being rated higher in your proficiency rating than the ACC, that is an all-time ranking, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have Stanford at .574, and I don't know. I just have to find North Carolina. But my guess would be, if I can't find it, would be that I probably have Stanford ranked maybe that's without.
Okay.
North Carolina,
Chris, I was not asking you to compare North Carolina and Stanford. I was just using them as an example.
I guess I don't. I have Stanford's written down, and I guess I don't have North Carolina's written down, so I can't tell you where North Carolina lands yet. But I have Miami, Florida, like I said, has a 6.635, which is that's not bad. And then it kind of surprised me. I thought they'd be actually rated higher.
I've got one other question for you, Chris, before I need to move on. So Alabama currently has the best winning percentage of all time by just a hair over Ohio State. So Alabama's number one also in your proficiency rating, and Ohio State is number 2.
Right.
Is that coincidence? It's obviously not coincidence. So is your proficiency rating very similar to these teams' winning percentages?
I didn't directly
all time?
to. I can tell you how I do it. If you want to hear it, it's not that hard to listen to. I mean, you might not entertain anybody, but there's okay. Do you remember how we kind of talked about how there's like a divide? There's the really good teams, or at least the power conferences, and then there's the not so. Well, I know where that divide is. It's 3-2 or whatever. In other words, I can take the winning percentage of Ohio State over I'll call them G5, even though that's really not. It's the teams that aren't in the power conferences, and then those are calculated a little bit. They're calculated the same, but they're divided by 3 instead of 2. And then all the teams that they play that are power teams are divided by 2. I add them together, and then I just add. There's like a that's pretty much it, except that I have to add like a conversion factor. It's like and I'll even tell you what that is. You want to know? I had to like figure out what it was. It wasn't real easy for me to do, but 0.055555. I mean, I'm giving you kind of like inside information here. But anyway, what that does is that kind of bridges the gap between the two different ways that I'm calculating it. And so, yeah, it's if Alabama has a better winning percentage, they're going to finish ahead of Ohio State. But really, they're only ahead by like a fraction of a percent. So if we went to just like 10, so 76% to 75%, that's just to the 10th place. So we're talking less than 1% difference between Ohio State and Alabama. And yeah, it's based entirely on winning percentage. I don't throw my own thing in there. That's not how I work. Like, and then I'm going to give Alabama points because they have, no, that's not what I do.
Okay.
So
I think that answered my question. Well, Chris, thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Have a good night.
And I want to post these online sometime. Okay.
Absolutely. All right,
For
Chris.
your information. Okay, you're welcome.
Call back anytime. All right, let's go to our next call here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's the real MVP.
There he is.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. How's it going, man?
I'm doing good. I'm going to need a mathematical explanation of what I just heard later on.
You and me.
Trying to write that down in pen and paper.
We appreciate Chris. He's got his proficiency rating. He's very invested in that, but I should stop him before he gets started to say, Chris, you got to realize that when you read off every decimal point, nobody's got any kind of graphic representation. It's just let's talk in generalities here. Let's just answer the questions.
Right. Like when he posts his rankings of the actual team list on a comment, I can look at it and, I might pick out a few that I disagree with. But in general, it's a solid list. But when he tells you how the sausage is made, it's like, what? It just confuses me. But anyway, Mark, let me ask you about the all-time rankings and how you're going to do them.
Yes.
My question to you is, if you have a team like Kentucky versus South Carolina, all-time record, I think is a great example of it. South Carolina owns the all-time record, but Kentucky has won 7 out of the last 8.
Okay.
So how would you reconcile this issue?
Well, that is merely the performance and the results between those two teams against each other. That's all that is.
Right.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Yeah, but I would think that would be a major factor in determining who the better program is if they've played tons and tons of games against one another. I think that would be a key data point.
Yes and no. So what you just said makes total sense, except for, and I find this out when I start ranking teams, whether that be currently or all time, is that what you just said makes total sense. If you're going to compare South Carolina and Kentucky, then of course you would look to see they play all the time. They've played 100 times. And if one of them's beating the other 70-30, that should matter because they played all these times. Right. And if that's all the comparison was, then that would make total sense. But that's not what we're comparing. We're comparing Kentucky against South Carolina, against Tennessee, against Alabama, against Kansas, against San Diego State, against Washington State, against and on and on
I get
and on.
I get it.
So it's not in a vacuum.
Okay, I get that. But if they were close,
sure.
Would it be used as a tiebreaker?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, and how would the relevancy of trajectory play into the all-time ranking? Like, for example, USC is a great all-time program, but recently they haven't been doing so well in the last 4 to 5 years.
Sure. So
is that 4 to 5 years going to weigh more than 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago when they were great?
That's the struggle, because I'll offer it up to you this way. They started keeping track of college football games in 1869. ESPN just did this huge series about the 150 years of college football. Well, that took us back to 1869. Harvard's won more national championships than Ohio State and Tennessee and USC and all. are those legitimate national
I think
championships?
Yale's got like 18.
Yeah. Are those
Them and
legitimate national
Alabama's got 18.
championships? Well, yes,
They are,
in
and
their
since they won the game to
in
get
their
there.
time, yeah, but there was no national championship game. There's also, if you add up all the national championships, it's not like let's add up the Super Bowls. We've, as you corrected me a couple of weeks ago, there have been how many Super Bowls? 56, right?
Yep, 56.
Yes, 56 Super Bowls. So you know what? Guess what? If we went to every team in the NFL and added up their Super Bowl championships, you know what it would total? 56. That only makes sense.
Right.
Same thing in baseball, the World Series. Yeah, it would add up to the number of World Series played. In college football, if we added up everyone's national championships, we'd have like 500 because teams claim national championships all over the place. And some of them are reputable in which they are claiming, okay, we went 9-0 and these other two teams went 9-0. So why can't we claim a national championship? There are also other national championships out there that their teams are like 6-2-2 and they just say, oh, we claim a national championship. Poor Auburn. I credit them for not claiming national championships. I would claim them. 2004 was the most recent one. They went undefeated. They played in the SEC. They won the SEC championship. They didn't get a chance to play in the BCS. If I'm Auburn, I'm hanging a banner and saying, we're the national champs. So if I wanted to make this like a labor of love for, if this was my job, I would like dive into all those situations and be like, okay, in 1907, these 7 teams claim national championships. Okay, that's legit. That I understand. Okay, 3 of them are. These other ones, that's ridiculous. They don't count. But, I obviously can't do that or this is going to be an 18-year project.
Right. And I think you would go insane also because of some of the claims.
Yes.
I mean, I think anybody would go insane. Any rational person.
So to answer your original question about the recency, this is what I struggle with, because if we're ranking all of college football history, then in a sense, a 1950 national championship should count as much as a 2015 national championship. But to David's earlier point, the national championship, for as much as I hate the playoff and hate the BCS, it has become more legitimate as time has gone on, because we just haven't had a bunch of bowl games and then people vote and say, we like them, so they're number one. We've actually had teams on the field competing so we can determine the national champion. So, and because of the number of games played and because of the quality of play versus trying to compare this in 1893, I do think I would in some fashion, weight the national championships more heavier more recently. But I wouldn't distinguish like a 2020 national title's worth more than a 2007 national championship. Not to that degree, but maybe here in the last 50 years or so. Segregation.
Right.
The black college football player is obviously dominant and a major factor in all of this, and constitutes, I know, 70% in the NFL. It can't be that high in college football, but it's of course substantial. Well, we didn't have segregation.
It's definitely a majority.
Yeah. We didn't have, desegregation until the 60s. Well, unfortunately, it didn't just come down in one year and then boom, 1965. The black athlete was given full access. It was in spurts in different areas of the country. And so, yes, national championships, I think, and just teams' records are more credible and relevant since that occurred. I'm big on wins and winning percentage. If you haven't guessed, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, since this is an all-time ranking, is things like coaches, the types of coaches that have gone through those facilities and the facilities and the equipment, does that stuff matter?
Well, I think that's a great point. that you bring up, although I think the greatness of the coaches is reflected in the winning percentage and the championships. So that kind of already measures that.
Right. Well, there's some examples from like the old days, like Georgia Tech. They had Heisman as one of their greatest coaches of all time. I mean, having him at Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech is a laughing stock as any Georgia fan. But I think they should get some credit all the time for having him as your head coach.
But my point,
just in my opinion,
I agree with you, but my counterpoint is that his greatness is reflected in the wins and losses. And those wins and losses are going to be, those wins and losses are going to be reflected in how and where I rank Georgia Tech.
Okay, that's fair enough. What about the actual facilities themselves, like the modern day facilities? Because some teams have great facilities, some don't have as good of facilities.
Yeah.
Is that going to factor at all in the rankings?
John Heisman, by the way.
What's where they do?
John Heisman, by the way, went 102 and 29 at Georgia Tech. 76% winning percentage. Okay. I was just curious to see what his winning percentage was. No, I don't think that's any factor.
Okay. I've seen some lists where they are, so I thought it was worth asking. And
I
Mark,
would not to cut you off, sir, but just to finish my point,
you're fine.
I would make that a factor in ranking programs currently, just like I did when I did the 1 through 130, because I think that is part of the status of the program, the ability to attract top talent, and the ability to develop them. So I think all that means something today, but I can't go back to 1950 and rank facilities.
Okay. Will bowl game appearances, national championship appearances matter? Because you got teams like Notre Dame who haven't won a big bowl game in like 30 years, but they've made it there, and I think they should get some credit for at least making it. So will that have an impact?
This is so this is where I struggle with bowl record. If we looked at every team's bowl record throughout history, there are certain schools, and for some reason, Ole Miss comes to mind. I think that they've got a really good bowl record. But other than a few times, Ole Miss is basically going 7-5 throughout its history. And when I say 7-5, old timers, I realize that you played 9 games, then 10, then 11. That's just a generalization. I understand we've only been playing 12 games for about 15 to 20 years. But anyway, Ole Miss is compiling a ton of 7-5 seasons and going to the Independence Bowl and playing unranked teams or number 24 teams in the country and winning bowl games. If you take Ohio State, for example, Ohio State has played a ridiculous gauntlet of postseason games in the last 20 or 25 years. Like they're always in the playoff, or before that, if they're missing the playoff, they're in a New Year's Six game. And before the playoff, they were every year in a BCS bowl game. So they're playing the top 3 or 4 teams in the country every year. Well, your bowl record's not going to be as good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The final thing I would like to say, and I want to get some spice. I want to get some passionate. I want to get some new callers. So, Mark, my final question is Alabama. They claim they want to win the title every year. They always claim around this time of year they're going to win the title, but they've only won one out of the last 4 national championships. How can you claim something is going to happen every year when you've only won 1 out of 4 out of the last 4 years? That doesn't make sense to me.
You lost me.
Okay, so out of the last 4 national titles, Alabama's won 1.
Okay.
But yet they claim every year they're going to win it. So how can you claim every year you're going to win it when you don't win it every year?
Don't fans from other fan bases claim that they're going to win the national championship in some given year?
Not in some given year, but not every year, and not to the extent Bama does.
Okay. Well, they win more than anybody else does.
Right. That's still not every year, though.
No.
And it's also only 1 out of the last 4. It's not even 50-50. It's 25%. So it's not even like every other year. So I just find that interesting.
Between you and the Rod Farva and his comments here, I think I need to shoot a video where I tear through every Alabama national championship in history that they claim. What are we up to with them? I think they claim 18. And
yeah,
I think
it's tied to Yale.
I think we're going to tear that down to about 11 is probably what it's going to turn
I think
out
that
to
would be
be.
a good idea.
Because some of them are ridiculous. They're pretty bad.
Didn't they claim one for being like 3rd place in their own division one time?
Yeah.
3rd place in your own division? How about you win division before you claim you win the best team in the country? That's all I got for you, Mark. Subscribe to the Notre Dame channel, hit the like, and Alabama fans, I want to hear from you.
There you go. All right, man. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
No problem.
Yes, our Notre Dame channel is like 50 subs away from 1,000. If you know anything about YouTube, YouTube takes you seriously at 1,000 subs. And if you know what we're doing here at the Voice of College Football, for as much as some of you probably don't want it, I would love to be here this time next year and then 5 years from now. And I thought of it the other day. We were thinking about what people do in old age to make money. And I said, well, fortunately, I chose something to do that I could be like 90 years old sitting here. I don't know how many people are going to be listening to me, but like 90 years old talking about college football and reciting statistics from 1995. So just keep in mind that we're building out a network, and our next key channel is the Notre Dame channel at 950 subs. We want to push it past 1,000. That's when YouTube starts to take you seriously and push your videos out into traffic and help build the channel. So whether you like Notre Dame or not, I would be forever indebted if you go to the Notre Dame channel and subscribe. All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, as we break down your criteria for ranking college football programs all time. And certainly, as I often say, we can talk about anything that you would like in the world of college football. So who's on the line? Okay. So that was a pretty scary phone call. That was an awfully scary phone call. And let me take note of that one. Where was that? Yeah, let's see. Okay. All right. Let's hope that we've got a legitimate phone call right here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, good evening, Mark. It's J-Dub calling from Des Moines.
Big Dave, how you doing? I couldn't hear you right out of the gate. I know who this is.
It's JW calling from Des Moines.
JW, yes. Appreciate you calling. What's going on tonight?
DeRio asked for the Alabama response, so here comes your class of '89 response.
Yes,
if he's ready. Hey, I was considering. It's so hard to say where do you draw the line. What's the modern era? Do you go to 1936 and go AP polls forward? What does it take? Here's what I know. Since the end of World War II, the Associated Press has awarded Alabama 13 national championships.
Yep.
There you go. That's it. I don't have anything else to say. There it is. Anybody else close? The end of story. And as far as, well, they've only won one of the last 4. Well, they played in 4 of the last 5. And since 2007, the only national champion that wasn't Alabama was somebody that during the season beat Alabama, except for 2013, when Florida State won it.
Mm-hmm.
So the real, in the words of Ric Flair, if you're going to be the man, you got to beat the man. I don't know how and I'm not trying to take away anything from what Oklahoma's done. I'm not trying to take away anything from the history of Ohio State, USC, the long, great history of Nebraska, Notre Dame, these other programs. I was just trying to immediately respond to what he said. That's all. I'm not trying to elevate the tide at the expense of somebody else. That's not my intention.
So my only response is that somebody would have to be a complete moron to not think or believe that Alabama is the best football program in the country right now. Now, we'll see if Georgia can continue to elevate itself, and maybe that mantle's been switched or whatever, but I'm not going to go based on the last 5 minutes of a national championship game without its two best wide receivers and saying Georgia's the best program in the country. They won the national championship fair and square, and all credit given to them. I just released my program rankings. I still have Alabama number 1. Alabama, to me, is arguably, and they certainly have a huge argument based on what you just mentioned, the national championships, which, even though I took a shot at, most of them are legit and cannot be argued or debated or criticized or torn down in any way. And then the winning percentage is Alabama slightly over Ohio State right now. And then we just looked at the rankings by the AP and the coaches poll. And, we can split hairs. If you're in that top 3 or 4, just because you were number 24 instead of not ranked in whatever a couple years, it's basically owned by Alabama, right. Ohio State, Oklahoma. They're right at the top. So by all measurements, Alabama is the best football program right this second and has been now for about 14 years and is arguably and most likely the greatest program of all time, in my estimation.
I just think that there are several programs at the top that are very good, but then there's just a few, and you mentioned them. I think it's Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Alabama that are just the next step up, which in no means takes away anything from the teams that are right behind them. That's not the point. I'm just saying, I think you have to make a distinction. And you talked about the overall wins, the bowl records. Who are you? And I loved what you said about the Ole Miss Ohio State comparison in the bowls. Who are you playing in the bowls? Are you playing a 500 team in the Blue Bonnet Bowl as opposed to playing the Pac-8 champion in the Rose Bowl? Back in 72 or whatever. I mean, yeah, you have to take all that into consideration. I just think that there are some programs out there, and everybody has their loyalists, and God bless them. I mean, you can root for whoever you want for, and as a fan of college football, I love to see passionate fan bases for Montana State, for Western Kentucky, for Colgate, for whoever you are. Whoever you root for, go crazy for them. But then don't win one every 40 years. And try to tell me that you need to be compared to somebody who's won 5 of the last 25 or whatever the case may be. You've joined an elite list of national champions, but inside that list, there's a whole nother category. And that whole other category is where Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Alabama reside, in my opinion, those 3. And then you can nitpick, you can split the hairs from there.
And what Saban's done in Alabama since 2007, and really, of course, they really kicked it into gear in 2008, can't be just dismissed as, okay, well, this is just current. The history of college football is 150 years, and really, modern college football is, we can slice it different ways. You just brought up the polls. I brought up the rankings and the polls to start this show. So let's say that we've got more like 80 years of college football. Well, if we're just looking at 80 years of college football, 15 years is a pretty good slice of it. So when you completely dominate the sport for 15 years, that should weigh heavily. Like if we were having, I had this conversation with somebody that called in a couple of weeks ago, and I was explaining to them that if we were having this, because there's this thought that, well, Alabama sucked before Saban. And it's like, whoa, hang on. If we were having this conversation 20 years ago, even before all these Saban national championships, which are what, 6? And all the great seasons, even when they didn't win the national championship, if we were having this conversation 20 years ago, sure, Alabama's case would not be nearly as strong, but Alabama would still be one of the 3 or 4 programs that we would be talking about as being arguably the greatest of all time. And then on top of that, you throw on Saban's record, and it's staggering.
Yeah, and for all the glory and the deserved glory, the career record, the career number of wins, Bryant won 6 national championships in Tuscaloosa, but it took him 25 years to do so in an era where he could just stockpile recruits. He could take he could have tight ends and receivers that would have played anywhere and just sit them on the bench. He would just bring people to Tuscaloosa just to keep them from Baton Rouge and Athens and Knoxville, And now with the restrictions on scholarships, the way things are, for Saban to win 6 and 5 or 13 or 15, as opposed to what Bryant did in a completely different era, is just, I don't know. Maybe somebody will do it again. Maybe Kirby Smart goes crazy. Maybe somebody we haven't heard of, and maybe somebody in the 2040s goes nuts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I just never thought I would see this. And I don't, obviously as an alum, I love it that it's my school that's doing it. But had it been somebody else, had it been somebody at USC doing it, you still have to shake your head and go, man, it's insane. It's insane. The man hasn't had a graduating class that doesn't leave without a ring. It's just it's amazing what he's doing. But I know you're going to have other callers. I'll leave. I hope I didn't irritate or confuse the comment section with some insane math like we know who does. I just thought I had to call in and give a shout out to Daryl. And hey gang, mash that like button for Mark, would you? YouTube likes the algorithm, and it's not going to cost you anything. So hit that thumbs up.
Appreciate that, sir. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thanks, Mark. As always, very entertaining.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just to add on to what we were talking about there, from the flip side, Texas is a blue blood, all-time great program. Well, we're looking at 10 years now of bad football. Marginal football. 2018 was a good season. Won the Sugar Bowl, beat Georgia 10-4, finished in the top 10. Okay. Other than that, 7-5, 5-7, 8-4. Bad record, like barely over 500 for. This is a good stretch now. Again, when we're looking at 80 years roughly of poll rankings, and somebody like Texas has been down for now 10 years, that's a pretty good slice of it. That's like 12 or 13% of that poll era. And we're not even counting when they've been down other times, like the 1990s for the most part. Nebraska is another example. They have not won a conference championship since 2001. No, I think it was before that, because the 2001 team's the one that lost to Colorado on the final Friday of the season and did not advance to the conference championship game, but still got to play for the BCS championship game at the Rose Bowl against Miami, which was stupid. And another prime example of why I rail on the BCS. What a farce that was. So anyway, Nebraska last won the Big 12 championship, I believe, in 1999. That was a long time ago. And they were good for another 10 years after that. Now, since joining the Big Ten, they had a couple nice seasons in the Big Ten under Bo Pelini. And when I say nice, I don't mean that like they were top 5 in the country. I mean they were top 20 or 25 in the country, going 9-4. They were decent. They were still good. People still paid attention. They played in the last 2 Big 12 conference championship games in which they were part of the league. And then they played in the second Big 10 championship game. But Nebraska, the years are starting to mount of being bad. So Nebraska, as you see in the poll rankings that we threw up at the top of the show, are number 7 in the poll rankings. But for the last 7 or 8 years, they've been completely, forget making a poll. They can't make a bowl game. All right. Welcome into the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. Good evening, sir. How you doing?
Michael, what's going on?
Now, Shane, you got a couple questions. I'm not sure. I've been kind of in and out of the stream and stuff. But has anybody talked about Minnesota as Illinois? And what would you put them? Would you maybe be top 10 to 15 or maybe in your top 20 with all the combined national championships they have?
Minnesota and Illinois.
Yes.
So let's start with Minnesota first. Minnesota won a national championship last in 1960.
Yeah.
So basically, this again goes back to the conversation we had a few callers back about recency and whether a national championship in 1960 or in 1930 should matter as much as what is being played now. So for Minnesota, think about that. For the last 60 some years, Minnesota football's been marginal. Like top 50. Like now, the last couple of years, they've been decent, and they had some nice little runs under Glenn Mason. And when I say runs, I mean 8-4, 9-3 years. Like they weren't competing for Big Ten championships, but they were decent teams, barely in the top 25. But those have been just sporadic. Basically, Minnesota football has been 500 for the last 60 years. Not much over. So Minnesota, I don't know how far I'm going to extend these rankings when I finally do them. Don't expect me to be like ranking number 83 in the country, because that's going to take a lot.
That's going to take you like 2 months to figure that out.
Yes. We're going to be probably top 10. I would love to do maybe a top 25.
And what about the Illini?
The Illini. Well,
yeah.
During our lifetime, or my lifetime, I should say, Illinois on a national stage has been completely irrelevant. Now, on a Big Ten stage, they were good in the 80s in spurts and right at the beginning of the 90s, and that's about it. They were awful in the 70s, awful in the 90s, 2000s. Pretty much the last 25 years, Illinois football has been terrible. They went to one Rose Bowl and got hammered by 5 touchdowns, but they should not have been in that Rose Bowl.
They went to the Sugar Bowl.
They went to the Sugar Bowl against LSU. They got kicked around. Yep, they did. That was a surprise. Oh, man, that was that Ron Turner? Or was that I don't think that was Ron Turner. Who was it was
that was
Lou
Ron.
Tepper.
I believe that was Ron Zook.
It was Lou Tepper, right? Was the
when they went to the Sugar Bowl?
Yeah.
No, that was Ron Zook, I believe.
Ron Zook before he no.
Oh, was he at Florida then?
Yeah, Ron Zook. He wasn't at Florida as the head coach, but he was soon to go to Florida. Then he went to Illinois in 2006.
Okay, that's what it was.
That was 2001.
I think
it was Lou Tepper.
No, Lou Tepper was back in the 90s.
Then it was Ron Turner.
90s, yeah, I think it was Ron Turner too. It was. Because I know they had some somewhat decent, like, good teams, but they won, like, real bad teams like they have in the last few years and stuff like that. But no, I was just wondering stuff like that if he considered his national championship. Because for the most part, but the list that David had, I pretty much agree with that. Except I would probably have trying to think who had number 2 and number 3. I might have switched them around. I agree with Alabama, but I might have had Michigan maybe number 2, Notre Dame number 3, and I'm trying to figure out who had 4 and 5. I think he had Ohio State 4. No, he had USC. He actually, would you guys, if he was to bump one out, who would it be to replace it with Michigan from his poll?
Yeah, I think David had Ohio State. I remember him having them at 4. So he must have had like Texas or Michigan 5. I think he went Alabama, Oklahoma, USC, Notre Dame, something like that.
No, I think he had Oklahoma 5. It was Oklahoma 5. That's what it was. It was Alabama, Notre Dame, USC, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Oklahoma. That's what the top 5 was.
Okay, Michael. Anything else, sir?
No, I was going to get your take about how you do it and wanted to throw those couple teams in and stuff like that because they were successful back in the mid 50s and stuff like that. I just want to get your take. But anyway, thanks so much, Mark. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep.
All right. A couple more calls on the line. Let's get to them here at the Voice of College Football. Thanks for calling. Who's on the line?
Hey, my name's Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, from one Mark to another.
Absolutely.
I have a couple of questions. I have a couple of questions for you. Number one, I know this might sound like a stupid question, but I was talking to somebody because I'm a former band member, and do you realize that the band, most college bands, put in more time than the actual football team? And my question is, could you imagine? I guess do the coaches and the coaching staff and players really appreciate the band and what they really do for not only Ohio State but any other school too? What do you think?
Well, I think it depends on the person. Depends on the coach, and maybe if they had band members in their household, they've got more respect for the hard work that's put in, and that while the football team's sweating in 95-degree heat, the band is as well, practicing all summer. Now, in particular, Jim Tressel, when he was at Ohio State, certainly brought back a lot of tradition in the football team, honoring the band, going to the end of the stadium to sing Carmen, Ohio after the game with the band and have that interaction.
Okay. My next question is, of course, I had to ask something about Joe Burrow. In your opinion, how close was Urban Meyer to starting Joe Burrow over Dwayne Haskins? Was it really that close, or because I heard somebody talking the other day, it was like almost like a flip a coin thing. What do you think? How true was that?
Well, if I've got my timeline correct, so of course in 2017, JT Barrett was the starter. Dwayne Haskins comes in to the Michigan game when Barrett hurt his knee. I believe it was his knee. Haskins comes in. He leads the team from behind to the win. It wasn't like he chucked the ball 50 times or anything, but he made a couple key throws, especially on a 3rd and 14. So he gains Urban Meyer's trust. Biggest game of the year, rivalry game. He comes through. They're down by a touchdown. He leads Ohio State to victory. So you got to consider that a coach puts a lot of weight in that. And then on top of that, if I've got my timeline correct, Joe Burrow injured his hand the next August. So they're competing in August, and Joe Burrow gets hurt. And I don't think anyone really knows, that wasn't on the coaching staff, how close Urban Meyer considered those two quarterbacks at that point. But they were only 2 weeks away from playing football, and Burrow was on the shelf, and Haskins, of course, then threw 50 touchdown passes.
Yeah. Okay. And I have another question too. It's about Ohio State's defense. I mean, from the way people are talking, they act like the defense was horrible. Actually, the defense wasn't really that bad, I guess, until like the last 2 or 3 games. But to me, I think what they should do is with all the great linebackers that they have, and I'm talking about Eichenberg and Cage, Stover, and all those other guys. With this new guy, are they considering a 3-4 defense, or are they going to keep with the 4-3 defense?
Well, the first thing I would say is that you're throwing the term around great pretty liberally. So Tommy Eichenberg really came on last year, and I was impressed with his development. I would reserve the judgment of great in applying it to Tommy Eichenberg. Now, the defensive performance, the last 2 games of the year, now they did save face in the second half of the Rose Bowl. They did play really well. I think they only gave up, 1 touchdown in the second half. But anyway, so they saved face there, but their first half performance in the Rose Bowl against a Utah team that is not an offensive juggernaut, that was pathetic. And the defensive performance against Michigan was pathetic.
Right.
So they did have the Oregon defensive performance was pathetic. So
I agree.
They didn't exactly contain Minnesota. Look at Minnesota. Take Minnesota, for example. Minnesota had trouble scoring against the likes of Purdue, Illinois, and some other teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And for 3 quarters, they had their way with Ohio State. Now, the Buckeyes did play a decent fourth quarter on defense. Zach Harrison, of course, had the big strip sack, and they silenced Minnesota in the fourth quarter, minus their best running back, Mo Ibrahim. So they had they started to play better against the likes of Nebraska, Penn State, the Purdue game. That was impressive. Even though they gave up a ton of points late, those points didn't matter. They only gave up 7 points in the first half to Purdue, and Purdue is a tremendous passing team. So I was impressed with the Purdue game, the Michigan State game. Those were really good defensive efforts. So they did play better down the stretch, and they played really, Nebraska burned them with a couple deep passes, but other than that, they played well against Nebraska. But the last 2 games of the season were disappointing. Now, in terms of a 3-4 and a 4-3, man, they got to play to the strength of that defensive front and put 4 of them out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do have one other question while I'm thinking about it, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It seems like, especially early in the season, up until like the very end, Stroud, the quarterback, C.J. Stroud, he had plenty of opportunities to run the ball, to scramble, and he would get all the way up to almost the line of scrimmage and say, nope, can't do that, and throw it away or do something. Was that designed by the coach, or he was just afraid to run the ball a lot? I was confused about that.
Well, we don't know for sure, but I'm about 98% sure that that's on C.J. Stroud, because I'm sure that Ryan Day would say, really? He coached Justin Fields as well. And even when Justin Fields was injured and really hampered, he still would take off and run the ball. If a quarterback, and you see it all the time watching the games, when 4 and 5 guys are rushing, there are often holes that in lanes that create themselves in the pass rush. And a quarterback, if it's 3rd and 4 and you got tons of green grass in front of you, just because one of your offensive linemen just took one of their defensive linemen to the side, and boom, all of a sudden you got this field in front of you to just grab a first down. You got to take it. I think he started, I shouldn't even say started to do it a few times, but I saw him a little bit more willing the last few games of the season. But he's got to take off and run with the ball. He's not a statue. He's an athlete. He can run. And I respect his wanting to stay in the pocket and make decisions and throw the ball and be a true quarterback. But my goodness, there are a handful of times each game for every quarterback, even the ones that can't run, to take off and pick up a first down or pick up 5 yards on first down instead of chucking a ball out of bounds.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Now I have one last question. I promise you, this will be it. Obviously Trayvon Henderson's a great running back, but towards the middle and the end of the year, it seemed like he found the runnings a little hard towards that time. Is there any way you think that that's Coach Tressel? What's the Coach Ryan Davies? Do you think there's any way that he will get him another running back to go with him in the backfield? Because to me, if he had a blocker back there, especially when it's like 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, it'll be a little bit easier to get those little tough yards instead of going outside.
Well, I understand what you're saying. And certainly for you and for me, we were watching football 30 years ago. And so we're used to seeing that and wonder where those days went. But at the same time, especially a head coach that tends to be...
I don't know about you, but I'm in my 50s.
Well, I'm right there with you. So...
Okay.
So for a coach like Ryan Day, you got to consider him to be, if anything, he's a little bit pass happy. He doesn't want to, unless it's inches to go for the first down and it's a quarterback sneak. He wants to always present a set that shows that they can do anything out of those sets. He's not the type coach that's going to line up a fullback in front of a tailback and run it off tackle on 3rd and 1.5. No, they're fully 4 wide. We may run it, we may pass it. You don't know what we're going to do, but we always can present the threat of the pass. You're just not going to see that out of Ryan Day.
He could always put like somebody in motion and run behind the motion man, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Put Jeremy Ruckert in motion and make him a lead blocker. Sure.
And by the way, I saw a couple of days ago that Jeremy Ruckert, he's probably going to be drafted late in the 1st round or early in the 2nd round. So,
yeah.
He might be the first one to go off the board for. No, he won't be the first. I'm sorry. In my opinion, it'll probably be Garrett Wilson going first, and then it'll probably be what's his name, Olave second, and then and ironically, they're probably gonna go before the guy that transferred to Alabama, Jameson Williams.
There you go. All right, sir. Well, I appreciate the call.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks for calling. All right. Before I take this next call, Falconer X, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Appreciate that so much. Falconer X says 2001 and 2002 Miami Hurricanes are the greatest teams of all time. Get ready to see it happen again. Win the ACC Coastal first. All right. Next call here, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark.
Hello, sir.
What? Hey, Mark. This is Davey.
It's Dave. What's going on?
Let's pray for the world because of the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
We all agree on that.
It's horrible.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, it's horrible. I agree. I want to go with the theme, college football, greatest football programs ever. Okay. Alabama won the national titles under Saban under 2009, 11, 12, 15, 17, catch my breath, and 20. And Paul Bear Bryant also won championships in 1961, 64, 65, 73, 78, catch my breath, and 79. Okay. Going by the theme of your program, Alabama has to be the greatest football program ever. Okay. I'm ready to listen.
So you have just listed off the national championships for Nick Saban and Bear Bryant, and then made the statement that Alabama has to be the greatest program of all time.
I throw in 1992 with Gene Stallings when LSU beat
Sure.
Miami. Okay. Okay.
Okay. You want my response to that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My first response is I put this live stream together because I am going to be ranking all the programs. And when I say all the programs, I'm not going to rank all the way down to Kansas because that would be like a 10-year project. But I'm going to be
Yes, sir.
providing all-time program rankings in the history of college football. And I just wanted some feedback from you and from everyone else on what you believe should be included in those rankings. So, for example, we've got a list here, and that doesn't mean I'm going to include them. That just means I want to hear your feedback. But as we have had these various callers call in these discussions, I've written down national championships, of course, All-Americans, Heisman Trophy winners, NFL draft selections, first round NFL draft selections, winning percentage, conference championships, bowl record, Associated Press and coaches poll rankings, and national relevance. So you are on the national championship bandwagon, which I completely understand. Also understand, Dave, that some of these national championships can be disputed.
No. Oh, okay, certainly. But also, Saban since 2009 has four, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 Heisman Trophy winners.
Sure.
No dispute, right? Okay. Just saying. You said that. Just saying.
I'm just pointing out to you that, at least based on my perspective, not every national championship is created equal, meaning that some of them are tainted.
That's right. Exactly. The last one, exactly. Because if Dabo and Misty would have been playing, Georgia wouldn't have won.
No, that's not what I mean.
Go ahead. You even said that, Mark. Go ahead.
I agree with you, Dave.
I heard you say that.
I have no issue.
I heard you say that, Mark, with Dabo and Misty. It says Georgia might not have won, right?
Dave, if you would just let me talk.
I don't want to even get to that part, because that's a losing argument on your part. Go ahead.
Okay. When I made that statement about certain national championships being tainted, I was not in any way alluding to the last.
You said, Mark. You said Georgia's championship was tainted because
I did not say it was tainted. I did not use that word. No.
I recorded it. I watched it.
YouTube records it for us. You don't need to record it. Dave, will you let me talk for just a second? Dave, will you let me explain? Dave, I'm asking you a simple question. Are you going to let me explain on my own show what I said and what I meant? Okay. First off, to conclude your question and your comment to this phone call about all-time program rankings, I was simply making the comment and the statement that if we went through every national championship in the history of college football, they're not all created equal. Some of them can be easily disputed. Okay. I'm not talking and targeting. I am not targeting Alabama when I say that. I am targeting anybody. Okay. For example, let me give you an example. In 1990, Colorado won a split national championship. They lost a game.
Because of the 4th and 5.
Yes.
Because of the 4th and 5. I got it, Mark.
And because of a clipping and because of a marginal, questionable clipping penalty in the Orange Bowl.
Down, Colorado.
Okay.
They were giving 5 downs, right?
Yes. Plus, they also got a cheap penalty in the Orange Bowl, which won them the game. So they really could have lost 3 games. So that this is my point, is that
everything forever and a day.
As you know from
saying, those are the what I said to you are the great and also verified college football championship. Okay. Okay. Let's go to dispute. My Saban championships are undisputed, right? All you're saying is Bryant championships may be questioned, right?
I'm not talking about all of them. I would have to go through each season and just give some context because it's not Bear Bryant's fault.
Listen, Mark, are Saban
Every time I start to
championships
say something,
disputed?
Dave, you cut me off. Let me
You just
complete
said
my
as well.
point. Let me complete my point. Obviously, Woody Hayes, Joe Paterno, Bear Bryant, Bud Wilkinson, all these great coaches coached in an era in which there was a vote. And we didn't have as many head-to-head matchups in bowl games and postseason games and not a playoff to determine a national champion. So it's just logical that there would be more disputed national championships because they played less games. They didn't play head-to-head. There was no playoff. So that there would be a Rose Bowl champion that's 10-0 and a Sugar Bowl champion who's 10-0-1 or something. And it just has to be looked at. So it's not a knock on Bear Bryant. It's just the era in which he coached.
Right. None of that Saban championships are disputed, correct?
Correct. Now, I will say that I don't believe that Alabama should have been in the 2017 playoff.
Right. But they won the championship.
Oh, sure. Oh, none of the national championships in the playoff era can be disputed from the standpoint of they all went out on the field and beat two really good opponents to win the national championship.
Right.
Absolutely.
Are you saying 2020 Alabama championship should be denuded because of COVID?
No, not at all.
Okay,
Dave.
And Mark, I'm just saying, I just told you all of Bear Bryant championship, and most of those are you can't dispute. I mean, especially 78, 79, right? I mean, maybe you go back and quibble with some.
The 78 and 79 ones are a bit. Consider this, Dave. In 1978,
Penn State, the goal line stop. Anyway,
okay.
I just say Mark, the title of your all-time college football program ranking, Bama's got to be one. Bear Bryant championship.
They don't have to be one.
Championship and Stalling one. Okay, you got it. No one else is there. No one else is close. No one else is there.
Okay. All right, Dave. You tell me that Dave, why do you start talking every time that I start talking? I've let you talk for like 5 minutes. And as soon as I open my mouth, you start talking over me. Dave, listen.
No,
listen. Let me make a point. Now, you have to admit, if you can take off your Alabama glasses for just a split second, you've got to admit this is a disputed national championship. In 1978, Alabama went 11-1. Okay, that's the year that they beat Penn State in the Sugar Bowl. So even that unto itself is disputable. That Penn State didn't score a touchdown. Because I've seen a zillion replays. I watched the game myself when I was 8 years old, and I've seen the replay a zillion times. It could be disputed that Penn State broke the plane and scored a touchdown.
No, not on that third down play. Mark, you're wrong. He was inches short of the goal line, and you know that. And even given that, Penn State didn't score on the fourth down.
It's disputed.
That's spoken.
I'm not taking a national championship away from Alabama because of that. But I'm telling you that if you were on the other side of that, Dave, I guarantee you would argue the opposite. I'm not saying that he did score. I'm saying it's disputed. It's just like if you're familiar. It's just like if you are. It's
Mark,
just like if you
you
are
and
familiar with the
everybody
2016 Ohio State-Michigan game, JT Barrett barely made a first down according to the officials, Mark. But I do not have an issue with any Michigan fan who says he did not make it. Do I know that he made it? I have no idea. Spots on the field are, especially in 1978, are just, they didn't have replay.
Okay, so you're disputing the 79 Alabama win.
I'm disputing it, not even because of that game. Dave,
on,
I'm not even taking that game into consideration. Listen to this. Alabama lost at home that year by 10 points, 2 scores to USC at home, and USC finished with the same record as Alabama and won the Rose Bowl. Why is USC not the national champion? 1978, USC should be the national champ. They beat Alabama head-to-head. They've got the same record. They won the Rose Bowl. They beat them by 2 scores in Tuscaloosa. They're the national champion. That's how screwed up national championships are.
No.
How can you even dispute that, Dave? You even, completely being a moron sometimes, have to admit when one team beats the other team by 2 scores at their home and finishes with the same record, they should be the national champ.
Okay, so for your reasoning, then, Alabama should be this year's champion because they beat Georgia by 20 points.
They played again in a playoff.
Okay.
This was not a playoff era.
Come on, man. Okay.
Dave, come on. Come on.
No,
you can't be that much of a homer not to admit that is it's not even a disputed national championship. USC should be the national champ. There's how do you debate that?
79? 79?
78.
78? No. Alabama won the championships of 78 and 79. You know? Okay?
Dave, you obviously refuse to or are incapable of processing logical information. This is obvious to me that you either refuse to do it or you are incapable. If you're incapable, I'm sorry. If you refuse to, which I believe is the case.
You have your anti-Alabama glasses on. I think at this point, sir, I think you have your anti-Alabama glasses on.
Dave, let me play out a scenario for you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's say next season there was no playoff. We canceled the playoff and said there's going to be a vote at the end of the year. And let's say Alabama, who's their big game? They play Texas, right? They play Texas on the road, right? They go to Texas. Let's say they go out to Texas and win by 10.
Most teams don't have the gonads to go there. Okay, go ahead.
Alabama goes to Texas. They win by 10 points.
Yes, sir.
Okay? They win by 10 points.
Okay, gotcha. Yes, sir.
And then by the end of the season, Alabama goes and plays in the Sugar Bowl, and they win. They win the SEC. They win the Sugar Bowl. They finish 12-1. And Texas goes and they go to the Fiesta Bowl, and they beat somebody, and they finish 12-1. And everybody votes and says, Texas is the national champion. What would be your response?
I think Alabama should play Texas.
Thank you. That's exactly what happened in 1978.
No. Yeah, but no.
USC 24, Alabama 14. Who's the better team? USC 24, Alabama 14. They both go 12-1.
Yeah, but did they play at the end of the year where it matters? Did they play?
It doesn't matter. They played in October. It didn't matter. It didn't count. Only the last game counts.
I can name college teams and that NFL teams that lost games to podunk.
You
teams
make
that have won
absolutely
the
no
championship.
sense.
Doesn't matter. That's a fallacy.
Dave, say goodnight. Say goodnight, Dave.
Fallacy argument.
Good night, Dave.
Fallacy argument.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Cut me off
You
again,
have
Mark.
no
Cut
clue.
me off again. You cut me off 2 times.
You don't know what you're talking
Let's
about.
go for 3, Mark. Let's go for.
All right. I asked him to say goodbye like 4 times, but he refused to. All right. I don't care if you're an Alabama fan, a USC fan, whoever you root for. This example right here is perfect in showing why this has been a screwed up national championship count for all sorts of teams. Oh, my word. I can only imagine what you folks had to say during that melee. All right. I'll have to catch up to it here. And I will, of course, take the next call. And thank you so much for the super chats. I will catch up with those in just a second. We got Falconer X. This guy doesn't make distinctions, but the scoreboard and the record books do. Okay. Because Dave says I'm biased and Ohio State claims a national championship in 1970. They claim a national championship in 1970. And you know what? In a sense, they may have a technical right to do so because a bunch of teams went 10-1 and they were one of them. Plus, the national championships were awarded and the final vote was made before the bowl games, which was really stupid. But Ohio State lost the Rose Bowl by 10 points. I'm not going to give them a national championship in 1970. Now, I may have to review the entire season and see if there were other things involved, but this is clear cut. You have 2 powerhouses, USC, Alabama. USC wins the game. We don't even, this isn't even a game. I've actually watched this game. I went back and watched this game. We're not even talking about a situation where like USC got 5 fumbles and kicked a game-winning field goal that hit the upright and bounced in and won 24-23. They won the game 24-14 at Alabama, a very difficult place to play. Oh, my word. All right, let me catch up with some super chats. Falconer X, appreciate that. And before I get to the next call, you know, this is what I can't tolerate is stupidity. I can tolerate a lot. I love the argument and the debate and for people calling me out when there's something to debate that's legitimate. But to not even concede that could possibly be some type of an argument that a team loses a game by 10 points and wins a national championship with the same record as the team that they lost to by 10 points at home. Ridiculous. Exploring with Ben, thank you so much for the super chat contribution. Appreciate that so much. I'm trying to get to a few other ones before I get to the phone call, because if I don't pick them off, then what is good, Mark? Yeah, BGPO Football Funk. He'd be right there with me on this last phone call, believe me. DeAndre, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And we got our guy, Neil. Thank you so much for the contribution. Appreciate that very much. Always love your content, Mark. A little for your troubles. Go Nevada. I love this. Neil is, I love hearing from fans who root for like off the radar teams. I love that. Michael told me, hang up on this more. Oh. We have such really good, pleasant phone calls most of the time. I got to admit, just a little part of me relishes those kind of debates where I can just yell at somebody. All right. Appreciate everybody being here. All right. Next call. We got 3 lined up. Let's take these 3 and call it a night. Right here at the Voice of College Football. Who's up next?
So, Mark, this is DeAndre. So, you have to talk about the subject I emailed you about, that tweeted you about.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the one
Oh,
where you
remember I
said something about Tennessee and Penn State. I thought you were talking about the last phone call. The last phone call, he was actually pointing out one of the seasons we've talked about in 1978 when USC beats Alabama by 2 scores in Alabama, and they both go 12-1, and USC gets chipped out of a national championship.
Yeah, you know, I think Clemson finished 11-1 that year.
Yes.
Also, they got shut out by Alabama 12-0, Georgia 12-0. But and that's the point I've been trying to make to some people is that, especially back then, a lot of championships were subjective. Again, I'm not trying to bash Miami, but you go through Miami's schedule in 1983, Auburn should have won the national championship. I mean, Auburn played a lot harder schedule and stuff like that, and they finished with the same record. But
yeah, I posted a video on that one.
Yeah, we have a couple because you did it for me. There's so many. Georgia Tech, Colorado, which we always talk about, and I think 1970. I think you brought that one up. I think we joked about 1935. I said Clemson should go back and claim like 2 national championships, and they'll have 4, just like some other schools. But the reason why I guess I didn't say it right when I came across it, what? I know you say you can't tell what the criteria is, but why is Penn State in Tennessee number 10? Why do you think in a poll error, those people, I know you can't say what you think other people think, but why would you think Penn State and Tennessee, what would your belief factor that Penn State and Tennessee would be number 10?
Well, when you say, DeAndre, what they were thinking, nobody's really thinking anything. They're just doing calculations. So nobody's making a judgment call. They're just going strictly by giving points to certain rankings. And I might be wrong on this because I didn't look at the point system, but I think this is how they're doing it, is that if Clemson wins a national championship and they finish number 1, they get 25 points. And then if you finish number 2, you get 24. And if you finish number 3, you get 23 all the way down to number 25 and you get 1 point. So then they add up the points and there you go. Those are your points for the entire 80 years.
Right. See, this is my problem. And I don't have an issue with Penn State per se. And I know Penn State's been probably in the modern era has been a better program than Pitt. Well, couldn't you say that Pitt has had a better program since 1936 over Penn State? Even if you say, okay, if you go by NFL and national championships, would Penn State have a bigger advantage?
Yes.
Over Penn State?
Yes.
Okay.
But man, since Paterno was the coach, Penn State was a lot better than Pitt.
Well, that's what I said. Modern times, when I say modern times, Paterno came coach at what, 67?
Yeah, 66, I think. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I would consider that more modern time because you had integration. So
yes.
So around that time, about 67. So I would say that Penn State, yes, was a better program. But if you go look at NFL productivity and national championships, you had to say Pitt was a better program because neither one of them was in a conference. I think Penn State might have a better record versus Pitt, but I'm just asking. And another thing I like to bring up, because we don't know what the criteria is, but Clemson has more national championships than Penn State and Tennessee.
What?
I mean,
what is it? 3 to 2? Yeah.
Yeah, and NFL players successful. I mean, because the reason why I say I picked that as a criteria, that's what Miami and Alabama fans always say. Like, look at what we got in the NFL and what we got in national championships. So if you go by that criteria, and I know everybody says, well, what about conference championships? But everybody always wasn't in a conference.
But this is where the national championships are screwed up again. Is Penn State, Paterno won national championships when he lost games and didn't win national championships when he had undefeated teams.
76, right?
Yeah, one was like in 69, 73, I think was another one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally agreeing with what you're saying. I just sit and say, I just want to know what's our criteria. Because if I'm going to rate programs, yeah, I'll say Alabama's one. But the way I look at it, and I know Ohio State has passed Southern Cal on the list of NFL players, but I would say Southern Cal has had a better program overall than Ohio State. And head-to-head on the field, too. So why is it Southern Cal ahead of Ohio State and Notre Dame on the thing? Again, I know you can't speak for the people that wrote the article.
Whoa, DeAndre,
but that's what I would look at.
Hang on just a second. You need to understand what they did here. They didn't look at national championships. Okay. They didn't look at Heisman Trophy winners. They didn't look at NFL draft. That is strictly what I listed there and what you DM'd me, and then I took off on it here, is just strictly, they just went through the AP rankings, and then the other one was the coaches poll rankings, and assigned a point total to where you finished in your ranking. If you finished, and I'm guessing on this one, but I think this is the way they did it. If you finish number 1, you get 25 points. You finish number 2, you get 24 points. You finish number 3, you get 23 points, and on down the line. If you finish number 25, you get 1 point. And whoever gets the most points throughout all these years, that's how they were ranked. None of that other stuff counts. Conference championships, national championships, nothing.
Yeah, and see, and again, we go back to being subjective. A point that me and you have always talked about. 1989, close to Florida State. Clemson versus Florida State at Florida State. And they finished with the same record, but Florida State finished number 3 and Clemson finished number 10. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, sometimes like rankings, how did you come up with such and such ranked at this level, but this team on this? So yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and don't get me wrong, I really do. I don't know what that guy was talking about last time. There's plenty of Alabama national championship. I would even say 2017 national championship for Alabama wasn't fair because Clemson had to play an extra game and had an extra week to get ready for the game because Alabama didn't make the SEC championship game, and Clemson had to go on and play an ACC championship game. So, I mean, I forgot who Clemson played that year. They probably blew them out, whoever they played, but still they had to play an extra game.
That was,
in Alabama.
2017. Why am I blanking on that one? That was Miami.
Is it Virginia Tech?
That was Miami.
Oh, Miami.
That was 38-3.
Okay. Yeah, but my point is, they still had to play an extra game. I'm not saying that Alabama still wouldn't have won the game, but that's unfair. The way they were doing the class, I think the first time Clemson and Alabama played, Alabama canceled classes for their team to have an extra week to practice without having to go to class. The Clemson players had to go to class. It was like some type of crazy rule. Sometimes you gotta look at certain stuff like that. And I know a lot of people say that don't matter, but we really don't know if it matters or not. I mean,
well,
I always made the argument. Go ahead.
That's not the reason I would question Alabama's 2017 championship. I don't think you can, if you're going to nitpick about who got more rest, and we'd have to go through every scenario in the history of college football, and I don't think that means much. My only question with Alabama's championship in 2017, which they completely earned on the field once they went to the playoff, but should they have been in the playoff? They didn't win the SEC. They didn't win their own division. They didn't go to a conference championship game.
I forgot who they beat that year. I know they beat Clemson.
They beat
Who
Georgia.
else did they beat? Georgia. Okay, yeah. But that's my point, though. It's like they didn't win the SEC, and Auburn beat them. And like I said, Clemson beat Auburn early in the year, really, really bad. Well, they said them, 55 times that game, and Auburn got hot, and all of a sudden everybody talking about, Auburn's the best team. And, it's all subjective when you really get to look at it. There's all types of reasons why teams lead. But hey, I just want to call in and say thank you for picking up my topic. And you have a good night, Mark. I'll be listening to the show. Hey, man, I haven't seen Bobby or Pete. We all got to get together one day.
Let's do it. I'm all for it. Maybe after spring practice, after the spring game.
Okay. All right. I can get over to you later, Mark.
Okay, DeAndre, thank you so much. David listed out Paterno's undefeated season, 68, 69, 73, 86 was the only one listed there where he was awarded a national championship. So think about that. Penn State, there's 5 seasons there where by all accounts, Penn State should have a banner in their stadium. Not that the other team should not, but in some of those seasons, there was a team with a loss, whether it's 68, 69, 73. Now, I know 86, of course, they beat Miami head-to-head in the Fiesta. They won the national championship. In 94, could have been a split, should have been a split. They should have just split the national title, Nebraska, Penn State in 94, just like they did the other ones. Why they didn't in that one, who the hell knows? All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
This is Bill.
Hey, Bill. How you doing?
Yeah, well, you just picked up one of the things I was going to say about Penn State's run undefeated, and they had 2 in a row. How do you go 68 and 69 undefeated back-to-back, and you don't get a piece of either? That's a little crazy. The caller, a couple callers ago, it sounded like the ghost of Harvey Updike's alive and well. The gentleman who poisoned the tumor trees in Auburn. That's what that guy sounded like. That's what that guy sounded like to me. The last caller. So I grew up in a Penn State Pitt household. My mom, hardcore Pitt fan. My dad, hardcore Penn State fan. I've been riding with Penn State since the '80s. It's the Penn State Pitt argument really isn't one. Just from somebody that's a forensic Penn State fan. Like Pitt's been pretty much irrelevant for 40 years.
Yep.
They were good in like the 20s and 30s, and a lot of their wins and national championships came before it passed. So, I'm not taking anything away from them, but outside of this last season, 1982 was the last season before this one that they were really relevant.
Yep. I remember it well. Yep.
Yeah. So that's not really an argument. That's not really an argument for me there. But yeah, Penn State, you got to think that we're definitely in the top 15. I want to say we're 7 or 8 in total wins, with a couple teams ahead of us just by a win or a couple wins, where we could be 5 or 6 in total wins or something like that. But yeah, how does Penn State go 5 seasons with Paterno undefeated and get one national championship? That's, to me, that they're definitely a blue blood that belongs in the conversation. And like you said, 94, I'll go to my grave, I'll go to my grave thinking that we would have beat Nebraska if we would have played them that year. But just a couple years later, Nebraska and Michigan, same deal. They both go undefeated. Michigan skates by, I want to say it was Washington State in the Rose Bowl in a close game. Penn State in 94 smacks Oregon bad. Nebraska skates by Miami in the Orange Bowl, and we don't get a piece of it. So, your argument, I don't agree with everything you say, obviously, but your argument about national championships spot on. It's ridiculous, and I think it's still kind of ridiculous, to be honest. But yeah, the Harvey Updike guy was that's nutty.
Well,
I was surprised you hung on.
Well,
I'll give you props for that.
Well, the thing about the national championships, unfortunately, there's not some kind of governing body or commissioner to say back then, okay, well, because of the bowl tie-ins, these teams didn't play, but it's obvious, okay, Penn State plays a great schedule, Nebraska plays a great schedule. There's no way to distinguish or determine, so they should split the national championship. It's just a bunch of individuals voting. And even beyond the examples you gave, consider this. Man, the Penn State people really get screwed here because in 1990, 91, 97, all were split national championships. And 94, for some reason, again, the voters just voted the way they wanted. And I'll have to look up to see how close the votes were. Not that it matters, but yeah, Penn State did everything that they possibly They moved into arguably the best conference in the country 2 years earlier and played a great schedule and should have split the national championship.
And I'm pretty sure, like, I don't know if it was the 73, I don't have my history exactly down, but one of those years, like 68, 69, or 73, the national championship, correct me if I'm wrong, was like awarded by President Nixon. He awarded. You can Google that.
Oh yeah,
but like
I know what you're talking about.
For electoral votes, and so yeah, he obviously awarded it to Texas. I could be wrong there, but yeah, it's a good show. The Penn State Pitt thing isn't. That's to me. I don't know where Pitt is in the all-time win.
Well, I just pulled up the numbers here for you. So this is what I go on. I don't really care that much about the all-time wins total because different teams started their programs at different times. So like Michigan's got a huge jump on all sorts of big power programs.
Yeah, State's not in the top 100 wins.
But if you look at winning percentage, Penn State's 9th, Pitt's 39th.
Yep. Exactly.
And as you well know, Penn State's always had a really good bowl record. They're 30-17 all time in bowls.
Yeah, and it's. I know, like growing up, one of the traditions in my family was whoever won, and then we used to play Pitt obviously every year, but whoever won the Pitt Penn State game, we have bowls that we put on our Christmas tree. That ball would go higher, and the loser would go lower. I don't remember Pitt's ball being higher than Penn State growing up. But a few times, like, I don't know. That I'll listen to other arguments, like, Tennessee and stuff, but the Pitt one isn't.
No.
Like, it's the 39.
No, they had like you say, 20s and 30s, and then of course the Jackie Sherrill, Johnny Majors into the Marino years. They had a nice decade there, not even a decade, but close to it.
Yeah, they've been largely terrible. And I actually like Pitt. I don't hate on them, but they've been terrible, really, and they're irrelevant. Their marquee win over the last 40 years, outside of this year, was when they were 3-9 and beat West Virginia and knocked them out of the national championship game. Literally, that was their best.
Pitt has been. I don't even know who to equate them to. I was going to say Michigan State, but they haven't been that good. They've been Purdue or, Kansas State or somebody, and not even Kansas State. Shoot, they had a nice run under Bill Snyder. So,
no doubt about it. Yeah, that's a really good thought there. It's like, who would you put? Where would Pitt be, like, analogous to another program? And it's like, is it Virginia Tech? Maybe, I don't know. Like,
man, even Virginia Tech, under Beamer, they had a ton of top 10 finishes and one major bowl game. So Pitt's been proverbial 7-5
Maryland
for 40 years. Maryland, yeah.
I don't know what it is, but it's not Penn State. I can tell you that. I can promise you that. And we're little brother to a lot of teams, but it ain't Pitt.
Yep. Well, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right. Good stuff. I could talk this stuff all night. I love this kind of stuff. This is another thing that needs to be looked at. Bamroff 62. So Penn State went through a couple different eras in a sense of football. This is really at the outset of them becoming a national power under Paterno in 66 is when he took over. So 68, 69. Yeah, I would have to look at the schedules to see if they're legit, because I do knock. I want to be fair here, and I want to be consistent, because I knock the BYU national championship in 84 on a fairly regular basis. Shoot. Let me take care of something real quick here. So I just wanted to, this is a great conversation. I love it. I love these discussions here. So I appreciate everybody being here. BGPO Football Funk says Clemson owns Penn State. I know they played in a Citrus Bowl. When was that? A Citrus Bowl like in 1989, 35-10 Clemson. I remember that year. Other than that, can't really remember Clemson and Penn State getting together. A lot of great comments here in the chat. Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. We will catch up with all of you soon. And in the meantime, lock it in. And we have a big lineup on Friday of all sorts of content that we're producing here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody being here. We will see you soon.